Welcome to Return with Honor, a Wyvern Nation podcast hosted by the 31st Fighter Wing Commander, Brigadier General Tad Clark. Enjoy the message.
Well, happy 2024 to our 31st Fighter Wing audience and other listeners that may have dialed into our podcast titled Return with Honor. Super excited. I've got Captain Ty Williams with me. He's a member of my Commander's Action Group. And we're really excited to share some thoughts on some themes this year in these podcasts. And today's theme is going to be evolve. And so, Ty, I'm really excited to talk a little bit more about what evolve means, how we came up with that word, what it means, where we want to go with that theme, and how it relates to everyone listening.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to the Wing. Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about today's conversation and what we're going to get into as it pertains to evolve. So I'm going to pose a few questions for you, sir. Before we get into evolve specifically, folks might notice that evolve is included in a series of our cultural tenets, which are associated with our wing enduring priorities.
That's right.
Right. So evolve falls under the mission priority, and it is the second cultural tenet, right? Deter, evolve, integrate. So what was the thought process? It's kind of a novel idea in terms of associating cultural tenets with priorities. So what was the thought process that you and the warlords, our group commanders, went through when you established these cultural tenets?
Yeah, you bet. It's a great question, Ty. And I think it's a good question for those that are in the wing and have maybe heard of these words. And then maybe for some folks that are dialing in and listening that are not part of our 31st Fighter Wing, but perhaps it can spark an idea of how you can infuse some cultural tenets in your workspaces, in your units, in your organizations, whether you're in the military or not. The thought behind our priorities, by the way, which are mission, airmen, and family, I inherited those. And upon arrival and upon taking command, I thought that those were worth preserving. I think one leadership trait, if I could just go off on a tangent for a moment, is honoring our predecessors and recognizing that there's a lot of great men and women that have put a lot of thought into their organizations and what they're responsible for. And when you take command or you step in a new environment, you need to be smart and deliberate with what you look to change and what you look to preserve. And so bringing it all back around, I elected to keep mission, airmen, and family as our priorities, which I think are fantastic and very applicable. With respect to cultural tenets, what we elected to do as a leadership team is come up with words that were specific to the culture we're trying to create here at Aviano Air Base in the 31st Fighter Wing. And I think that changes from season to season. And we felt as if we, as in the leadership team at the wing and group level on our leadership offsite, almost a year and a half ago, we felt as if it was necessary to craft some words to use and speak to and emphasize in the wing so everybody knew what we were trying to do. And it helps synchronize talking points. It helps ground us in what we're seeking to accomplish, and most importantly, in the manner in which we need to accomplish it. So all that to say, as you shared, Ty, one of our cultural tenets in our mission priority, so again, mission, airman, family, and the three words, the three cultural tenets we have tucked up underneath mission is deter, evolve, and integrate. And so today's theme is evolve, as you mentioned. Evolve speaks to the innovative spirit we're trying to cultivate and grow in this wing. We had considered innovation, creativity, those words, and those words would have been applicable and perfect as well. But we thought we'd change up a bit and use something new. Innovation, creativity, and those types of things we hear a lot of, and we thought maybe if we were to use a new word that captured the same purpose and meaning would help rejuvenate the purpose of that word. So evolve in terms of being adaptive and flexible and creative and having an innovative spirit. We think, and I think, and I know you think, and we all agree, that is really, really critical and important to creating a healthy, vibrant, productive, efficient, growing culture. And that's what we need here.
Amazing. So now that we have, thank you for that background, that explanation. So now that we have kind of the starting place of these cultural tenets, as we dive deeper into evolve, for our airmen out in the wing, my big A airmen, what does evolve mean to you personally, right? And how might it apply to them within their specific corners, within their specific AFSCs, in a professional context specifically? How might evolve correlate to what they do day in and day out?
No, I appreciate that question, Ty. As I think that through, the first thing that comes to my mind is our airmen, our team need to be subject matter experts first. You have to master your trade craft. Although I love innovation at all levels, what I don't want is people stepping into a new job or role or responsibility that doesn't have the subject matter expertise or perhaps the context to make a recommendation, do things differently if they don't have the full picture. And that's not meant to be pejorative. It's just that we are responsible for understanding our roles and responsibilities. We have to dig in deep. We have to read. We have to study. We have to practice. We have to rehearse. I mean, looking at you, I mean, you're a college football player, NCAA. You just don't go out there in the field trying a new position and saying, hey, coach, how about we try a new play, right? How would that work?
It wouldn't go over well.
No.
It wouldn't go. I'd be on the sideline.
Yeah. Exactly. And we need you on the field. So, I mean, you demonstrated competence and proficiency and skill all through high school football. You're recruited to play collegiate football, something not everybody's able to do, but that's because you mastered your trade craft, or you're working towards mastering your trade craft. You reviewed film, you studied, you prepared, and you certainly practiced, and I'm sure you did 2 days all the time, right? So you mastered your trade craft, and I think that's a really important vignette or example as we think this through and relate it to the profession of arms. We have to know what we're charged to do. This pertains a lot to our first-term airmen. Who are first-term airmen listening? You know I love you, and I'm excited that you're part of this wing, but we want you to learn, listen to your supervisors and leaders, take notes, study, and apply yourself. Then as you've mastered, or you're in the process of mastering your trade craft, and we never master it fully, but it's a journey. But as you gain proficiency is probably a better way of stating that. Now you're better equipped and capable to think broadly and think about things creatively with critical thinking skills, problem solving, and then suggest, talk, coordinate, communicate, collaborate with your supervisors, your peers, and your subordinates to maybe develop some new ways to do things, because there are ways we can improve. And we've seen that time and time again throughout the years, countless years. The history of our Air Force is predicated on innovation. In fact, if I could be so bold to quote General Alvin, who was now our Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and the only reason I'm sharing this with you with a certain sense of confidence to share this with you is I had the great honor and privilege to work for General Alvin as his executive officer just a couple of years ago in the Pentagon when he was the Vice Chief of Staff. What I love what General Alvin said is he said that although air power is what defines the United States Air Force, what birthed the spirit of the Air Force is a spirit of innovation. Thinking about how we can apply, in this case, air power to achieve effects that were once thought through two-dimensionally on the ground and on the sea. And then as we thought more three-dimensionally, more innovate with an innovative spirit, we infused air power as a combat capability beyond just reconnaissance. And we were able to use that to apply different capabilities in a wartime environment. And so I love how General Alvin captured that and articulated that. And so when I think of this, again, I mentioned it's important that we start off with subject matter expertise. That gives you credibility. That
Absolutely.
gives you a platform from which to speak from, and then can lead to innovative solutions. And if we have a little bit of time here at the end of the podcast, perhaps I could share a historical example of what we saw, but it required subject matter expertise and credibility before said individual could come up with an innovative idea. And I love that story, but I'll save that for the end if we have time.
Absolutely. I think everyone would enjoy that a lot. So thank you for leaning into that question, sir. For me, I love that you went into subject matter expertise, proficiency, right? When I found out we'd be talking about this topic, one of the first things I wrote down was that before we can evolve, it begins with knowledge, right? Knowledge of your craft, which you beautifully elaborated on for us. Thank you for that. Where my mind kind of goes to next is former chief of staff and his accelerate, change, or lose.
Yes.
Right, mindset that he instilled within our Air Force, and now General Albin, who you mentioned, right, our now sitting Chief of Staff of the Air Force, his commitment to follow through on the commitment that General Brown established, right, throughout our service. And so, to me, that is evolving. And as a support function for me, right, so I think there's no limitation on how we can each evolve professionally. And the implications, I believe, are far-reaching, right, regardless of the AFSC or career field.
If I could jump on that, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think because when you and I have talked about this in the past, I think we both agree it's a mindset.
Absolutely.
And so regardless of your job, regardless of your AFSC, which stands for Air Force Specialty Code, that's the Air Force's way, for those that are not in the Air Force listening, that's the way we identify different jobs in the Air Force. So beyond what we're tasked to do in our job, we need to have a certain mentality. We often talk about a warfighter ethos, warfighter mindset, and I think very much in keeping with having a warfighter mindset is having an innovative mindset, one that's adaptive, flexible, one that can evolve, right? And so if I could bring in, as you mentioned, General Brown, who's now our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as you mentioned, and General Albin, our Chief of Staff, and even Secretary Kendall, who visited us here less than a month ago. These gentlemen really have a great way of capturing and understanding and valuing the need for us to change, particularly in light of great power competition. And at the heart of great power competition isn't necessarily very specific tools and technology and investments that we need to make, although that is important. At the core, at the heart of the whole concept of great power competition, I would argue, is we have to be adaptive and evolve to ensure that we stay ahead of any particular adversary that seeks to change international norms that are countering the international norms we have established now, which are those set to provide freedoms and protect people and to provide a better way of life. And so if our job, if our charge, if our mandate is to remain resolute on making sure that we protect the international norms that represent multiple countries that desire and love and thrive in a free world, then we have to be adaptive. We cannot continue to operate the way we've been operating in the past. We have to flex to a new way, and the only way we can get there is if we're willing to evolve.
Yes, sir. So now that we've kind of set the stage for how we can evolve, what the implications of evolve in a professional context, right? For someone who might be wondering, in this new year, right, in 2024, as energy is high, motivation is high.
Yes.
Right. How can I evolve personally in terms of that growth mindset, becoming a better version of myself? So what does that mean to you? What are the implications for our listeners?
That's a great question, and it may not have the best answer, but a couple things that come to mind. Number one, we have to look at it as a journey. I mentioned that a few minutes ago, but Just like when perhaps those that are listening have come up with some New Year's resolutions of what they want to seek to accomplish this calendar year in 2024. For some, not all, but for some, perhaps after a few weeks, a month or so, the motivation may wane a bit. The distractions of life may crowd back in once we get back into our normal battle rhythms. And hey, that's reality. That's life. So one thing that's important to do to provide the consistency, the perseverance, the grit that is necessary and required to continue to move in that direction, whether it be personal goals or looking to evolve, is you need to surround yourself with people that are going to keep you accountable and continue to encourage you and continue to motivate you. That's why when we talk about our cultural tenets, it's so important that those not just become stale words on a slide that we provide in our newcomers brief every Wednesday morning at 9:10. So when Chief and I stand in front of the auditorium every Wednesday and we welcome our amazing new members to our wing and our family here, I share this with them, I don't want those words to become stale. We need to be men and women of action, men and women who are genuine, men and women who are sincere, men and women who understand the culture we're trying to create and understand the responsibilities we each and every one of us have to put those words into action. A culture is not created only by the leadership, although that's essential. The culture of an organization is a we thing. It's an us thing. It's a team thing. Everyone takes part. You don't like the culture? Do something about it.
Right.
Step up. Understand what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and in this case, evolve and be innovative. We need to hold each other accountable, which goes back to surround yourself with people that understand that. If you find yourself around those people, that'll encourage you, that will stimulate curiosity, it'll challenge you, it'll keep you sharp, it'll keep you alert and productive and efficient and dialed in. And those are critical for a healthy organization. And if you find yourself around people that are not, then build a cohort that agrees with that. I'm not advocating groupthink. I'm advocating a culture that challenges the status quo, thinks through things differently, and wants to evolve and be creative. And let me end on this. You notice I just said challenge the status quo. If you do it in a professional way with credibility through a collaborative manner, healthy. Challenge the status quo in a defiant, beat the system, discouraging, disparaging, a negative way with the negative tenor and tone, that is cancerous in an organization. And there is a difference. So when we think about evolve, creative, innovation, challenge the status quo, it's not what we're trying to do, it's the way we're doing it that matters. And we want to do it in a way that's productive and builds the team, not cripples the team.
Yes. Yes, thank you. For me, evolve within a personal context. I liken the word, in the personal context, I liken the word evolve to the word transform.
Yes.
I think that's it's a beautiful synonym that highlights that journey, that iterative process. And I like it because another word that comes to my mind after I say the word transform is deliberate, right? It's the deliberate decision to move in a new direction. And so whether it is philosophy, whether it's biblical scripture, whether it's science, I think there are a number of either theories, sayings that support that transformation begins in the mind.
Yes.
Right? Renewing our minds, renewing the ways that we think. And so for me, that's the first step to transform, to evolve on a personal level. And I think an easy correlation or analogy is using the human body, right, to drive a point home. If I am making a goal for myself to make some change in my physical body, right, whether it's becoming more lean, or maybe just shedding a few pounds, or cleaning up my eating habits.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So much of what, and there's a number of metaphors for this, right? Whether it's putting fuel into a car, right? Or, right, what you put into your body. So often we reflect that which we reflect our inputs, right? Is a way to put it. And so for me, if I have the goal of transforming or evolving, however, my inputs are not conducive to that transformational process, it's a non-starter.
Yes.
Essentially, right? And so inputs can be anything from, before I get into that, it's remarkable how in the 21st century, the number of things that we both have access to and that have access to us.
Yes.
And so that deliberate decision-making, which I mentioned a moment ago, of taking charge and taking control of what have access to us and what we allow ourselves access to, right? Maybe it's the music that you're listening to. Maybe it's the conversations that you're engaging in. Maybe it is the media that you're consuming, the food that you're eating, right? To evolve, to transform, I believe, right, after making that deliberate decision, now we make that deliberate decision to, hey, what are my inputs? Let me analyze that. And is this input, is this thing that I'm engaging with moving me closer to the person I want to be or further away from the person that I want to be?
Yes.
And I think at that point, that decision becomes clear, right? And that can inform the direction that we move out in. So for me, as a person who feels rejuvenated in the new year, most times I'll say, right? Not all the time, but most times, right? Draws energy from the changing of the calendar.
Yeah.
As I step into 2024, both myself and my wife actually together, we're making that decision of, hey, what are our inputs this year? Right? How am I spending my time? What am I spending my time on, right? And engaging with. And so for me, that's an effective way to ensure that I am transforming or evolving as we progress throughout the year.
I love that. The words you use in terms of transform, iterative, deliberate, those are powerful words, Ty. Let me just piggyback on one thing you mentioned, which I love. I do wholeheartedly agree. It starts in the mind. In fact, and I'm borrowing this from someone who penned this, so this is not original thought, but I love it, and I've used it throughout the years. Watch your thoughts because they affect your words. Watch your words because they affect your actions. Watch your actions because those develop your habits. Watch your habits because that becomes your character, and your character later becomes your legacy. And that was not scripted just now. You saw I just wrote those notes when you were talking, so that was just on my heart and mind to share that, because I really do think if you're to kind of trace back to the legacy we leave during the time we have on this planet, it all goes back to what takes place in the mind.
Yes. Yeah.
100%.
Amazing. So we have just, thank you for sharing that quote, by the way. I think there will be some real application for that for our listeners. So just in the few minutes we have left, you mentioned perhaps sharing some historical context, some historical application concerning our theme for today. So I know I'm excited to hear it, and I'm sure our listeners are as well.
Well, I appreciate this, and as you and I agree, just 3 days ago was a really interesting time in our wings / one of our squadrons' history. So specifically, 2 January 1967, Vietnam War, there had been years of significant loss. In fact, when I last looked it up, over 550 aircraft had been lost in 1966 in the Vietnam.
Just that 1 year alone.
In that 1 year alone.
What?
Difficult to grasp, just to get your arms around that number in today's circumstances. So at that particular time, there was a fighter wing that was based out of Thailand, the United States Air Force fighter wing, and that was the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing. And that is now that history has been preserved because the 8th Fighter Wing is at Kunsan Air Base in the Republic of Korea. And so for those that are listening, that you've been stationed at Kunsan, you know, like I, that have been stationed there twice, that there's a lot of rich heritage and history in the 8th Fighter Wing. But during the Vietnam War, it was the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, and the wing commander at that particular time was Colonel Robin Olds, who later became a brigadier and then later a major general in the United States Air Force before he retired. Multiple ace, World War II, the whole thing. Amazing gentleman, amazing story. There's so much to read about him and study. But let me just get to the point with the innovation. So he was wrestling with how can we change this trend of losing not just the jets, but the air crew associated with these aircraft. Lives are being lost, and our American soldiers and sailors, and in this case, our airmen and our Marines. In this case, airmen, though, were being taken captive in the prisoner war camps, best known as the Hanoi Hilton in Hanoi, North Vietnam at that time. So he got together with a few others, in particular, one of his major contributors to his wing, a tactician by the name of Captain J.B. Stone, and he said, hey, listen, let's tackle this problem. And so what they did is they crafted this idea of taking the routes and the call signs and the electromagnetic emissions that were emitted from the F-105 fighter bombers that were heavy, small wings, less maneuverable. Let's use the same call signs, fly the same routes, and put pods in the jet to make them look like F-105s so that when the MiG-21s launch and they proceed to attack what they perceive to be F-105s, they'll be surprised, and we can turn on them with the more formidable and maneuverable F-4 Phantom II. And that's exactly what they did. On the 2nd of January, 1967, they launched the F-4s with Robin Olds in the lead. They flew the route that the F-105s typically flew. They used the call signs on the radio that the F-105s used. And again, they had pods that they only could use for 7 days before they had to give them back to the F-105 community to make themselves look like F-105s. And sure enough, the MiG-21s, the North Vietnamese MiG-21s, are launched, and they rolled in from high to low, intercepting and engaging what they thought were F-105s, and in fact, they're F-4s. Robin Olds and his wingmen and flight leads churned on the MiG-21s. Not a single F-4 was lost. They shot down 7 MiG-21s on that single day. Why is that significant? There are only 16 MiG-21s in the North Vietnamese inventory. So if you do the math, that's almost half the North Vietnamese MiG-21 inventory in one day. And what I love about that story was it was birthed by evolving innovation, critical thinking, creativity. And the only way they were able to develop that plan, like we started this podcast with, was because they had the subject matter expertise to pull in the tools, the assets, the capabilities, and the proficiency of their air crew to develop the plan, to brief the plan, to execute the plan, and to succeed with the plan. It's a tremendous, tremendous story. And that operation was Operation Bolo. In our very own Triple Nickel 555 Fighter Squadron, at that particular time, 555 Tactical Fighter Squadron, flying the F-4, they were the ones that participated on that particular day.
All right, sir, so that's all the time that we have. Thank you not only for sharing our history, but the manner in which you did it. The storytelling, I believe, is critical as we move forward. It's important to look back every now and again, remember where we came from. So I'll pass it to you, sir.
Well, it was a great topic. I really enjoyed our time together, Ty, and I hope our audience enjoyed it too. So I'm excited about this podcast, and I think it's fitting for us to close each podcast with our motto, Return with Honor.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about Wyvern Nation or events happening in and around the 31st Fighter Wing, visit the Aviano Air Base Facebook page or navigate to the 31st Fighter Wing page through the Air Force Connect app. And if you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. See you next time.